Our first session today is mental health during and after the pandemic with Kristen. Kristen is a registered provincial psychologist with the College of Alberta Psychologists. She obtained her bachelor degree in psychology from the University of Alberta and pursued her master's in counseling through Athabasca University. She has 8 years of experience helping children, adolescents, and adults who struggle with mental health issues, multicultural issues, grief, attachment, relationships, and trauma. She's been practicing as a mental health therapist for almost 4 years, and she specializes in child, youth, adult, seniors, couples, and family counseling. She also loves to collaborate with other professionals and facilitate group therapy and workshops about healthy relationships and various mental health issues. Kristen, we're so happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Laurel. And hello, everyone who is joining us from the comforts of your home or wherever you may be. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. We're going to be talking about mental health during and after the pandemic. I remember when they reached out to me, it was going to be after the pandemic because things were opened up in the summer. But again, we're still in it. So I just kind of had to put that little code saying during. So we are still in the pandemic. So it'd be good to talk about what you guys are experiencing and how we can deal with some of these things that we are experiencing during this time. So again, my name is Kristen Oliveros. I am a registered provisional psychologist, and I do have a private practice called Holistic Therapy and Counseling. And so we're going to be talking about things that I definitely see in a lot of my practice, especially with when during the start of the pandemic, when I was working with seniors, things that seniors were experiencing. So we're going to be talking about grief and changes. First of all, I really want to normalize that what you guys are all going through, what we are all going through this time is an immense change in our lifestyle, right? The pandemic related consequences, such as having restrictions and guidelines upon guidelines, have resulted in immense changes in the way we live. Right? So grief is actually a natural part of change. So what is grief? I got this from James and Friedman, who are psychologists, and they did the grief recovery method. There is even a book about it. And I really like the definition that they put on grief. What is grief? Grief is the conflicting feelings caused by the end of or change in a familiar pattern, just like what we're going through, right? With the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we were able to do a lot of things. And then after that, the consequences to it is we don't have a lot of freedom to do all of those things, right? So there's definitely a big change. So conflicting feelings might be, you might experience different emotions, right? On one hand, people can be relieved that, they don't have to socialize a lot, but then also be sad because they can't connect with people anymore. So you can have more than one feeling about this. So we experience grief when we perceive a significant change as negative, for example, job loss, lockdowns, but we often do not think of grief when we see the change as positive, like having kids or getting married or getting a new job that you really like, right? However, all of these changes actually induce grief because change, whether negative or positive, disrupts the connections or attachments that exist. So for example, if you are entering, you're getting married or you're moving from a different life transition or getting, like, for example, for seniors, it's retirement, right? It's awesome that you don't have to work, but at the same time, if work is something that provided you with a lot of your identity and roles and responsibilities and it filled your time, it can really feel kind of sad as well, right? Because you're leaving something that was so important to you at one point. So change is really hard, although it is inevitable. We do experience change daily. However, it is still really hard on us. So we definitely can experience grief due to these changes. So changes in the pandemic include, but are not limited to, not seeing people we love as much as we want to. Before, we can be like, oh, I want to see my children. I want to see my grandchildren. And now it's really like up to what's going on. Right? Having to wear a mask everywhere we go, right? That used to not be the case, right? But now it's like, we just have masks everywhere. Not seeing people's smiling faces. That's the one thing I'm really sad about. I really love seeing people's smiling faces. Not being able to go to Sage, right, or rec centers that you used to enjoy as part of your routine, your daily coffee shops where you meet your friends and family and stuff like that. Quarantine measures ask us to isolate for weeks, right, away from our family members and loved ones. Not being able to socialize with other people as much as we have is also a big change. Not being able to feel safe in places where there's a big crowd. So if you are spiritual and you go to a church, that's also, that used to not be the case, right? Where you still don't feel comfortable in a big crowd like that. Constant changes in restriction guidelines, wearing masks for months, and then suddenly they change it to like, people are not allowed to, or people can be allowed to not wear masks anymore, right? So it's a lot of change, a lot of shifting without a lot of processing and without a lot of time, right? That is allowed for us to process what's going on. So ergo, it seems like we are in constant grief from the changes we have been experiencing. I want to talk about a couple of primary emotions that people fear, or people, sorry, not people fear, people feel during this time of the pandemic. So one of the core emotions that I always hear from my practice, seniors, young adults, or I see pretty much everyone. And fear is one of those emotions that gets triggered a lot during this pandemic. So what is fear? Fear is actually one of the primary emotions, right? So it's a powerful core emotion that gets triggered in our limbic system, and that is our emotional brain, right? It's called the amygdala. That is the one that gets activated, right? When there is a danger or threat in the environment, right? That is your fight. That is where fight, flight, freeze, fawn happens, right? So fear is a normal response that gets activated when our brain detects something is threatening, right? That is either perceived or real. Experiencing fear has the same physical symptoms of anxiety. So therefore, it is really hard to discern whether we're feeling anxiety or fear, because they really have similar physical experiences or symptoms, which I will be talking more about. So next, we'll talk about anxiety then. Anxiety is another one that I hear a lot, right, in my practice, right, with people experiencing during this pandemic. Anxiety is a type of fear, and it is a natural and normal response to stress when it motivates us or warns us of danger or threat, just like fear. Anxiety is a stop reaction to the impulses that fear and other core emotions create inside the body. So sometimes anxiety is like an overwhelming sort of, I call it like an overload of all these emotions, right? And it just gets into this one big pile called anxiety. So anxiety can be confusing because we can experience it due to something triggering in the present, right? We are we have sensory experiences. So it's something that we see, right? Smell, taste, touch, or feel, right? It could trigger something in us in the present, and we can experience it from something that happened to us in the past that continues to influence us. Anxiety tends to be used to describe worry because it tends to persist over time, and fear is focused about something in the future or the past, rather than the present moment, right? So for example, anxiety comes about, but what does it look like in the pandemic, right? So anxiety during COVID looks like you can't think about anything other than getting COVID, right? That is something that's kind of like future focus. It's like, I'm going to get COVID, I'm going to get COVID, right? You're thinking about that. Your anxiety interferes in your daily life. For example, you have a hard time going to work or being in public spaces, even when the risk is very low, like outdoors, for example, no one's really there, but you still kind of like are anxious going out, right? You isolate yourself from others when it isn't necessary. You feel hopeless or angry about the situation. You have a hard time eating or sleeping well. You experience physical symptoms like frequent headaches or an upset stomach. And of course, that is not limited to those things. As you can see in this picture, this kind of captures all the physical symptoms that you may experience when you are ridden with anxiety or fear, right? So overthinking, avoidance, sweating, it can actually manifest in our physical body. Stomach issues is one of them. I know a lot of people have IBS because of anxiety. Panic attacks happen, needing reassurance or validation, like that we're safe or that we're okay. Lack of patience is another one, right? because obviously your mental energy is getting used up by overthinking about all these worries, right? So you are obviously impatient with things. Procrastination, you have trouble concentrating, probably not getting a lot of sleep, right? So, and of course we need sleep to be able to concentrate and do executive functioning. Constant worrying, trouble breathing, headaches, rapid heartbeat, insomnia, memory issues, and a plethora of other ones. So how can we manage fear and anxiety during the pandemic? I really wish it was simple, right? But here are some of the things that I've seen that kind of work for people. Being aware of your emotions is really important, right? Being able to discern, okay, is it fear that I feel? Is it worry? Is it anxiety? Am I anxious about something, right? And that's the first step, is just to name it, right? We do say name it to tame it, right? Our brain doesn't know what's going on if we don't name it, right? If we don't tell it, okay, this is what I'm feeling. That way we can validate ourselves. It's like, okay, what is it that I'm fearing? A lot of times right now it is circled around, say, for example, death. Death is a natural fear of all of us, right? It's crazy because it is inevitable. We all die, but it's something that we don't normally talk about. So there's a lot of stigma or fear around it because we don't talk about it in the society, right? We celebrate birthdays, but we don't really talk about that kind of stuff. What about death, right? So it is normal to feel this extreme fear about dying. And also with the pandemic, if we think about it, dying is different now too because of COVID, and it spreads rapidly. It's isolation too. Like dying alone is it's one of my fears. So I'm hoping some people can relate to that. If we feel fear, we can actually challenge the evidence of the threat or danger to determine if it's perceived or real, right? I was reading a book and it's called Think Like a Monk, and it talked about fear. And I really like the acronym about it. Is fear stands for false evidence appearing real. Sometimes our fear are literally real. That's why we need to determine if it's real or not. If there's a bear there and it's attacking and it's charging on us, that is a real fear and we need to get out of there. But if it's perceived, like for example, with the pandemic, it's like, I fear that I'm going to get COVID. Is that really real in real time and happening right now? Right? Well, not really. I can't say if I feel it right now, right? I can't say that because I don't have the test right now to actually determine that it is a real thing that's happening to me. If we feel anxiety, we can determine our worries and what core emotions are being triggered. So if we're worried about something, we can actually try to slow down the process and determine what emotion am I really feeling? So if it's, I'm worried about getting COVID, when I think about that myself, for instance, I am worried that I will not see my kid, my family, right? So the core emotion now is not just anxiety or fear, it's actually sadness, right? I will miss contact. I don't know what that feels like, right? To be away from him for that long, if I have to quarantine or things like that. So the core emotion can be other emotions too, right? And those emotions need to be heard and acknowledged as well. Exposing yourself to your fears may actually work to overcome worries that may be perceived and not real. So in therapy, when we do have exposure therapy, but I do recommend this doing with a therapist or a clinician or professional. But sometimes fear, especially if it's perceived, right? Exposing yourself to it. So going out, if you're fearful of getting it outside, but that's one of the things that's important to you, maybe just kind of doing small things, right? Small goals, like, okay, maybe I'll just go to a park when there's nobody there, right? That kind of thing. But you're still exposing yourself to go outside, right? If that is a fear of yours during this time. What else can we do with anxiety? Because it's such a body-based experience, right? That emotion, fear and anxiety is really seated in our body. Exercise does wonders for it. And it doesn't have to be going to the gym, where if you can't go to the gym, right? It could be walking. It could be as little as, just moving your body, whatever that means for you, right? Exercise is still really good. It's the best anxiety medication, in my opinion. Relaxation techniques like massage, yoga, meditation, grounding techniques, if you do Tai Chi or other things, anything that activates your parasympathetic nervous system. So our nervous system, right? Parasympathetic nervous system is our rest and digest, and your organs are working properly when it is activated. Healthy eating, right? That is something that you are able and equipped, right? Groceries are not closed, so we can definitely have access to good produce and good food. Psychotherapy, so counseling or therapy can be a good space for you to really determine what is underlying those fears and where does it originate from, especially if there are a lot of perceived fear. Faith, spirituality. I know a lot of people during this time are just getting into that spirituality. Having a bigger perspective for some reason can definitely create more mental space, and it will help us to radically accept what's going on, and which I will be talking more in later slides here. So I want to really focus on a good strategy for anxiety. So we talk about locus of control. What is this locus of control? This is it's an individual's belief system regarding the causes of his or her experiences and the factors to which that person attributes success or failure. Locus of control refers to the extent to which people feel that they have control over the events that influence their lives. So what does that actually look like? I have an image here. Locus of control. If it's an internal locus of control, the things that we tell our brain, right, are things like, I can do this. I will, I make things happen. I control my destiny. Look what I can do. So what does that look like in the pandemic? If we have internal locus of control, it's like saying, I have the ability to keep myself safe. I have the ability to be healthy. I have the ability to, like, if I do get COVID, that I will make it through, and I will do my best to really fight that, right? And my body, I trust my body can do hard things. External locus control, as you can see, this guy or this person is literally like kind of hunched over because it's like, oh, things just happened to me. I guess this COVID, this pandemic is just really just happening to me. I can't do anything about it. I can't help it if I get COVID, if bad stuff happens. I just give up. I'm just going to die, right? We're thinking about the worst case scenarios we can't even control. So locus of control here. I kind of created this little image here with a sloth with like meditating. So we really want to focus on what we can control these times, right? Because if we think about it, COVID, we don't know if we're going to get it or not. It's super fast. There's different stories out there where so-and-so didn't even like go out for months. And then the moment she like walked out or she went to a church, she got it. Like there's so many variables, right? And then we hear people that have it, I definitely do, where they literally don't have all the symptoms, right? So it's so variable that we cannot really pinpoint how to get it and where to get it and when to get it, right? So why are we focusing on those things when it just takes up a lot of mental space? So I wanted to talk about with the locus of control and the inner circle, these are the things you can control. Of course, they're not limited to, but these are the things that I kind of just, as an example, let's focus on these things, right? How much we can control, how much news, social media you read or watch, right? I can turn off my TV, I can turn it on, right? If I hear news that there are people dying, all of these COVID numbers increasing, how is that really helping me fight this illness if I do, right? It's just taking a lot of mental clutter. My thoughts, I can control my thoughts, right? We can control our thoughts. Whatever we think about, we can control. How you follow the guidelines, that is on you. Finding fun things to do at home, that is also on you. Your feelings about COVID, that is something that you can control. Your own social distancing, when you wear your mask, right? When you wash your hands, all of those little things. Your positive attitude is something you can control. Your grace and compassion and kindness to people is something that you can control. How you connect with your family or friends, whether you like talking to them on the phone or just letting them like walk outside and just, I definitely see that. I have a neighbor and her kids just like visit her and it's nice. They have social distancing, right? And she likes to connect with her kids that way. Those are the things that you can control. What you can control, however, is like, can we really control how other people react? No, we can't. Other people's motives, we can't. Other people's opinions about this pandemic, we can't. Other people's beliefs or worldview, predicting when COVID will end. I really wish, if you can do this, please let me know, because I really want to know when it's ending too. But I can't control that either. The actions of others, can't control that either. If others follow the rules, whether it's pandemic time or not, we don't know. People speed all the time. People do all crazy things all the time. We can't control it, even though there's guidelines and rules, right? And the amount of toilet paper at the store, I can't also control that. So why bother? It's really a choice, right? I want you guys to see that there's choices here. In the pandemic, it really made us feel powerless, and that we don't have control, or we don't have a choice. We don't have choices. But I want you to know, when we have the internal locus of control, you do have a lot of things you can control. I can control what coping tools I use, right? But I can't control these other things that people do. And this was taken by a psychologist who wrote an article on Psychology Today. In other words, given the same circumstances, individuals with a strong internal locus of control may fare better than those with a strong external locus of control, because they may be more likely to make choices such as maintaining safe social distancing, wearing a face mask, or frequent hand washing, reflecting the belief that their actions influence the outcome of the pandemic, which makes sense, right? If you have the control internally, you are more mindful, right? Because you don't have a lot of those mental clutter, right? So you're in a space where your brain is working optimally. You are like, wow, I know what I need to do. I need to wash my hands. It's very clear what you need to do, right? But if you're in fear or worry, you're thinking about what others are doing. You're not even thinking, oh, while you're doing that, you might be touching your face and you're touching your eyes, where we know that that's how like a virus kind of transmits a little bit faster, right? Hence, a strongly held internal locus of control might enhance emotional resilience and result in attitudes and behaviors that could potentially lessen the risk of becoming infected with or spreading the virus. We do know that we are in fear or anxiety ridden, our nervous system hikes up, right? Our sympathetic nervous system hikes up. That is when our organs are working so hard to keep it regulated to the point where our cortisol levels or stress levels increase. And we know that when we have those cortisol, like stress levels hiked up, our immune system is working harder to keep those down. And if we do have COVID or other illnesses like flu or cold or whatever it may be, how is our immune system going to have the space to work on fighting those things if they're trying to keep us relaxed, right? So stress is something that we can control. So strategy for fear, right? Increasing ways to feel safe and secure. Fear is really activated because there's a threat to safety. So it's up to you to define what safety or security is like for you, right? These are just like common stuff. But of course, if there's other things that make you feel safe and secure, I think being honest about it and being able to voice it out as part of your boundaries can definitely help you, right? So if it's washing hands, physical distancing, wearing masks makes you feel safe, go ahead. I know for myself, I also feel secure when I'm connecting with people, and I check in with loved ones, right? Simple as a text and email. Hey, are you doing okay? Good, great. We feel secure. And again, this will vary from each individual, and we just really want to respect people's definitions of safety and security, right? Another thing is determining if your fear is real or perceived, and then reframing your thoughts. So if it's real, check the facts. I always ask, how do you know if it's real? Check the facts. Is it a fact or a feeling? Am I really facing real symptoms of COVID, or am I just worried that I will get COVID? Perceived, give evidence and counter evidence and provide alternative thoughts that are more realistic. So things like, if people don't wear masks, I will get COVID. Well, not necessarily. What are the evidence of that? And what's a counter evidence of that, right? And providing something that's more realistic, like, okay, well, technically, I don't know how I really would get COVID, but I do know that it gets transmitted this way. So how do I prevent those things? So maybe that is a more realistic way to go about it. Coping mechanisms, these are really important right now. What are they? Thoughts and behaviors mobilized to manage internal and external stressful situations. They can be subconscious or unconscious, adaptive responses used to tolerate or manage stress. There's negative coping mechanisms like ruminating, overthinking about COVID, criticizing yourself for others, blaming yourself for others, denial, overconsumption of alcohol, caffeine, especially if you're having high anxiety. Caffeine is definitely something that you want to decrease. Drugs or substance, smoking, yelling at other people, becoming aggressive or violent towards other people, avoiding or withdrawing from family and friends. Positive coping mechanisms may include listening to music, playing with a pet, laughing or crying, talking to your friends, family over the phone, taking a nice bath, writing a gratitude journal, doing creative things like reading, painting, knitting, cooking, baking. Obviously, there's a lot more here, right? Getting outdoors, nature, counseling, relaxation techniques. Making an action plan is a good one for the pandemic. Discussing or sharing feelings or problems with close friends or family, right? Just discussing like your fears to someone can be very beneficial during this time. Acceptance is another coping mechanism. Positive reframing, right? Our positively reframing our thoughts can also be positive. So we're going to do a breakout question. Sorry with the time for the volunteers, just please take less time if you need to. So what is the purpose of this? This is not story time, but it's a place for you guys to kind of reflect, share something that you want, or maybe even problem solve. Volunteers reserve the right to end discussions that may be offensive to anyone, and they may redirect people to the question due to time constraints. I would really encourage you guys to just share, but maybe not to share too much because it is not being recorded, by the way. However, it is not like therapy where you can really, where you can get guaranteed confidentiality, right, from people. So I have some questions for you guys to reflect on. Using the locus of control model, what can you do that is within your control to increase your internal feelings of safety or security? You also have a choice to reflect on the second one, where you can talk about what positive coping strategies can you do or maybe are willing to try to develop or strengthen during this time that we have in the pandemic. Hello, welcome back everyone. And we are going to continue on. Hopefully you guys had a good time sharing or listening in to other people. All right, we're going to move on. Okay. So I'm going to talk about post-traumatic growth. This is something that's really dear in my heart because I really practice this in my own practice as a therapist, right? So what is post-traumatic growth? It's a theory that explains this kind of transformation following trauma. So the pandemic can be traumatic for a lot of people, right? It's something that maybe, especially if they haven't experienced other sorts of trauma, this could be something so new and that could be very difficult. Post-traumatic growth is a concept that's developed by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Paulhan. This holds that people who endure psychological struggle following adversity can often see positive growth afterwards. So according to Tedeschi, people develop new understandings of themselves, the world they live in, how to relate to other people, the kind of future they might have, and a better understanding of how to live life. Key dimensions of post-traumatic growth that they measure are appreciation of life. So they've seen changes and shifts where people appreciated life a little bit more. Relationships with others, right? So for example, in the pandemic, I'm thinking of how can we look at these dimensions and think of them during this time that's very difficult and uncertain. Well, more than ever, this actually kind of opened up that opened our eyes, that connection, right? Attachments are so important because we don't live in a bubble, right? We do want, as human beings, we are attachment creatures. We like connection. And so relationships with others can be very meaningful right now. And it's challenging on how we connect. However, it is still an important thing. There's new possibilities in life. I know a lot of people talk about I love it when my clients tell me all the things like hobbies they have picked up, right? Whether it's learning how to play an instrument or learning how to knit for the first time or having more time to reflect on their lives, right? There's just it also creates new possibilities. I picked up hiking, and I was never been a hiker or whatever, but I picked that up and some other new things. And now I love it. Another one that is measured by post-traumatic growth is personal strength. And I will actually be talking more about that and how you can use that so that you can thrive in this difficult time that we're experiencing. And spiritual change, right? So spiritual does not just mean religion, but it can also mean having a deeper relationship or a bigger perspective on things about what's happening, right? So personal strength is one of the things that I want to focus on. I would like to focus on all of them, but however, time constraints, I can't do that. So I'm just going to talk about personal strengths, because especially for seniors, one thing I really admire about seniors is they've been through a lot. You guys have been through a lot, right? Like kids and jobs and different kinds of things. You guys have witnessed a lot of things through in your lifespan, right? So strengths are natural capabilities and skills that each person has. In the pandemic, I've seen a shift where we focus on our roles, right? Whether we were moms, dads, parents, whatever job description you did, right? Whatever, volunteer, like all of those roles, right? That you used to do. And once those were taken away, we're kind of like left wondering, who am I, right? However, I want to actually emphasize that those are roles. They can be taken away at any point in time. However, the strengths and qualities you possess to do those roles, right, are things that you always will have. Like even the pandemic cannot take those away, right? So in therapy, we even use strength-based approach because we actually have found, right, there's research saying that when a person uses their strengths, they tend to feel energized and report higher levels of self-esteem, well-being, and other desirable outcomes, such as achieving your goals. So for example, I want you guys to think of this. The roles you played, whether it's a parent or you were an accountant or whatever role that you played, right, in your life. What are some qualities that made you become really good at doing that role? Right? So there's a list here of different strengths, right? Like active, adventurous, brave, courageous, hardworking, open-minded. The list goes on. So sometimes when you're feeling really bummed down by this, I want you to think, well, as a mom, for example, what are the qualities I possess to be able to do that? Well, I'm nurturing, right? Caring, compassionate, organized, things like that. How can I use those strengths so that I can move on and deal with all the problems and difficulties I'm experiencing? So how can we use the concept of post-traumatic growth to help us manage our mental health during this time? Well, if we use all of those, like what we're learning and what this is teaching us rather than what this is like creating problems, right? The shift in perspective, it can actually enhance your resilience to stress, trauma from the pandemic. It's kind of like saying, hey, we made it through last year, right? How did you do that? How are you sitting here listening to me right now, right? If you didn't do all of those strengths that maybe you have, right? That pulled you through that hard time, right? We can't short credit ourselves for doing that. It can help us have a better appreciation for life despite the pandemic. Definitely gratitude, right? Just being able to sit here in front of you guys and being alive, right? There's just something about that we appreciate what we have more, because now we understand, having restrictions and limited contact with people, we now know how important those relationships are to us even more. And we appreciate, I don't know about you guys, but I appreciate birds chirping, the fact that I can hear them chirping or whatever. I'm just so appreciative right now. It can also help us reflect on the things that really matter to us. So for example, our loved ones, who your real friends are, who your real family members are, and our values. A lot of times we lose sight of values because when we're stuck in doing a lot of the roles, right? When we're grandparents or parents, we're stuck on those roles. We don't really talk about our values, like things that are important to us. Well, how would you know that maybe adventure is something that's important to you if you've never really sat down and reflected like, oh, wow, this is something that fulfills me, right? It sheds light on the strengths we always have had. And I really want to emphasize these qualities you possess. That is something no one can take away from you, no matter what you go through, whether it's negative or positive. Being a hard worker, that's going to be you throughout your lifespan, right? You being optimistic, you being understanding and caring and compassionate, and all whatever qualities you may have, those things stick with you, right? I can't even take them, even if I want to, but trust me, I don't want to take them because you need those ones for right now. And it can help challenge old limiting beliefs or worldview that, that are not helpful in our lives, right? So I want to do this last breakout question for you guys. So the first one is, I want you to think of a past experience where you overcame a difficult situation in your life. And what qualities did you have that helped you manage that hard time? Another question is, identify a strength you have noticed within yourself as a result of going through the pandemic. If it is not a new strength, how has it changed? But if you notice that if it's actually a new strength, how did you develop that? So I want you to do more reflection and thinking outside the box for now. All right, welcome back everyone from the last breakout question. Just being respectful of time, I do want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in and for just being there to really absorb that information. And I do have a little special thank you note for all of you guys. So special thanks to Sage, first of all, for really supporting our seniors community, just a platform where they can actually access information about mental health and other health and wellness stuff. I think it's great that what you guys are doing for the community. And of course, to all the people that are here, thank you everyone for your time. I encourage you to celebrate and remind yourself of your strengths that you have as we move forward in the uncertainty of this pandemic. Your compassion and kindness to yourself and others are things that you can control. This pandemic cannot take the human in all of us. Not now, not ever. So take care and be safe, and please connect to yourself and others. And I do want to share one of my favorite quotes from Rupi, and she says this: "The world gives you so much pain, and here you are making gold out of it. There is nothing purer than that." So I really want to leave that message to you guys, especially on those days when you're feeling down and you're feeling hopeless about what's going to come out of this. Please stay grounded, stay in the present moment, because what we have is now. And just reminding yourself that despite all the difficulties you might be going through, you are still here, well and alive. All right, take care, you guys. Thank you very much.